quick, I want to recognize 3 men on this panel that voted for 183. Now, whether we like 183 or not, whether we agree with everything on 183 or not, is not the point. But these 3 guys have fought in Springfield for every one of your rights against supermajority opposition. They sweat bullets for us. We'll bend their ears when they make a mistake, and you can ask Dave Severson, and I thank you for being here. If we believe they made a mistake, they might not believe they made a mistake, but if they make a mistake, we'll bend their ears. And when they make the right choice, we need to recognize. So if you would stand up, the 3 of you, Joe, Dave, and John, stand up. A round of applause to stand for our Second Amendment rights. Thank you so much. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and get to the questions. I'm not going to ask the question first. Who's got a question for Mayor Morrissey? Darren Bergman, could you come up here and ask that question, please? Oh, you know what? I apologize. Stop. Hold it. These guys get a 5 minutes each. You 4 get 5 minutes each. I apologize. I wasn't looking at my script. So, Dave, could you start? And then we'll go to John. 2 minutes each. Just speak your mind. Dave, John, Joe, and Mayor Morrissey. Okay? And then some microphones on the table.
Okay, I'll speak my mind. I can't do it at home, so I might as well do it here. Thanks everyone for showing up. It's always great to meet with the good guys, and so after spending so much time in Springfield meeting with the opposition, this has been an issue we've worked on year after year after year, and if it wasn't for the courts who really forced this issue, we wouldn't be here today in the position that we're in. So we thank you for your patience year after year, and your willingness to take the time to point out that the concealed carry legislation only works in 49 states, so I don't know why it would work in Illinois, but it has, and so we're glad we're finally getting it through. We have a ways to go, and we'll take some time. We have questions to go over the details of the legislation. It is not all that we wanted, but it is more than we thought we could get when you got Quinn, Madigan, and Cullerton to get through. So it's more than what we thought. Once we get this done, we'll continue to work to make progress and improve the legislation as time goes forward. But the next hurdle, this is far from being done yet, because Quinn and Madigan and Cullerton are going to do whatever it takes to put roadblocks in the way, to put regulations in the way, to delay a setting of rules, and so we think it's going to be at least 6 months before we get something finalized, and so this fight is long ways to go yet, but this is certainly much more progress than we thought it was going to be. So thank you for your patience. I look forward to answering your questions and continuing to work with you as we bring common sense into Illinois.
Morning. It's good to be home amongst sane people and not in Springfield any longer. Just a couple of housekeeping things. If you're parked out here, you're going to be blocked. I'm blocking you. So don't get mad. I'll move my car. I'll get somebody to move it for you. But there's a lot of people blocked, so if you have to leave, please be patient. There's excellent turnout, obviously. I see Kelly Ebank back there. Thank you again, Kelly. Kelly and I went to high school together. We grew up technically respect each other, so it's good to see Kelly. Is that Jeff Starnes back there too? Jeff, I see Jeff back there. We went to high school together. We're finally joining the 49 other states. I am not happy with this final bill. I was a co-sponsor of House Bill 997. I thought that was the best bill. I did not sign on as a co-sponsor of this bill because I wasn't happy with it. I voted yes for it because we need to move it forward. I can guarantee you this. The NRA lobbyists and myself will be filing and the other gentleman here are going to file several trailer bills to this, starting in January, to get this bill to House Bill 997. Because there's a lot of things in this bill that I do not like, and we will fight to change it. Now, there's some state attorneys out there that are saying, they're not going to prosecute anybody. If you start to conceal carry now, please do not do that. We can't say that the state police isn't going to arrest you. We can't say the federal government won't come in and do something. We've waited this long. We can wait just a little bit longer. I apologize that you've had to wait this long, but we'll get there as soon as we possibly can, and we will get this bill so that we're happy. It might not be tomorrow, it might not be the next day, but we will fight as long as we have to make sure that we're happy. Thank you so much. We're looking forward to your questions.
Thanks also for having us. I'll be short. Some of us representatives who have been there more than just a year know not to park illegally. All that aside, anybody wants to call a tow truck, go ahead and have it towed out of here. We don't want him back. He doesn't want to go back down to Springfield. We won't allow him. But we're, as John and the Senator alluded to, not overly excited about all aspects of this legislation, but the key is it got out of the House, it got out of the Senate with supermajorities. So despite the fact that the governor got a 30-day delay, if he vetoes it, we should be able to get this passed through both chambers with those same numbers. And that's the important thing to note on this. When you are dealing with Collerton, who's been there for 30-plus years, and Madigan, who's been there for 40-plus years, these guys have a lock on a lot of different things, but to be able to get bipartisan buy-in on a piece of legislation that we can get into place is a huge first step in this state. And you know how long it's been to get to this point. So no doubt, we'll definitely have follow-up legislation. We want to fix things. I'm not overly excited about the 16 hours. I think it's a bit excessive. The dollars that you have to put in to get it is more than some states. We need to fix some of those things, and we'll be able to do that. But I'll tell you, from talking with NRA, State Rifle Association, others that have lobbied in other states, there's parts of this bill and areas that are prohibited or are not prohibited that other states they're still prohibited in. So we have some good things in here that other states are, we're still trying to get into place. So despite some of the bad, there's a ton of good. We're going to keep working on that. I'm optimistic that we're going to be able to put enough pressure on this. I was talking to a young lady, just a little bit ago inside the room here. Send letters to the governor, send emails to the governor, call his office, put pressure on him. That all helps. I think we'll hopefully know soon. I don't think the courts are going to grant any more stays, and we'll be able to see this thing move through. Just one quick last thing, and of course I'm going to be open for any questions here. I did have a handout. I'm sorry, I only brought 100, so some of you probably didn't get one. They're on your tables. We have a couple extra up here. If you want a copy of it, just contact my office. It tried to condense the bill, which is about 100-plus pages, down into 2 pages, giving some of the general overview about qualifications, restrictions, prohibited areas, and those types of things. So hopefully that's useful just as an oversight. I'm sure many of you have probably read through parts of the bill or all of the bill. This gives a little bit of an overview, and I'm happy to get more copies out to you if you guys need them. But I'm available for any questions, so I'm all done. David, thanks for having us. Really appreciate it.
Good morning. Thank you for the forum this morning. I apologize again that I'll have to leave just before 11 o'clock. But I have some family obligations I've committed to this morning. Number one, let me just say, if anybody doesn't already know, that I do support the concealed carry law getting passed in Illinois. I support the court's decision ordering our legislature to come up with a law, or else I think it's been extended out until the end of July, it looks like. For the city of Rockford, I do not support us having variations from other parts of the state. That was one of the things that's been asked of me when the bill was being developed. I think it doesn't make any sense to have a different rule for Rockford than DeKalb, than Chicago, than any other part of the state. To the extent that there's any carve-out at all that gets done, I think the fewer the better, because it simply makes it hard for anybody coming into the state from some other part of the country, or even citizens within our own state, to be able to manage the law when there may be variations like that. I also just wanted to announce, and I said this a couple times publicly before, but I've dropped out of a group called the Mayors Against Illegal Guns recently.
Because you're not a fraud
or
or a criminal.
The reason why I joined the group in the first place is because I took the name for what it said, against illegal guns. And the challenge that we see day in and day out in the city of Rockford is not dealing primarily with assault weapons or machine guns, automatic weapons. It's dealing with typical handgun. All of those typical weapons are usually in the hands of people who are prohibited from having them. Not 100% of the time, but the vast majority of the gun crimes that are committed in Rockford, you can ask John Cabello, who served on our force in the Rockford Police Department, they're not committed by law-abiding citizens. Those crimes are committed by people who have felonies, people who would be prohibited from having a gun, people who don't have a firearm owner's identification card. So the reason I joined the group is that the original focus, I thought, was going to be focusing on better enforcement of existing laws, and if anything, we have talked about not getting involved with things like banning assault weapons and banning magazine clips. As the original mission swayed, that's when I decided that it was no longer in line with my beliefs. I was growing in that discontent for some time, and so that's why I've dropped out. By the way, they still may have me listed on their website. I checked it recently, and we're asking them to get my name taken off of that. So I think those are the main areas that I wanted to make sure I covered right off the bat. I'm happy to take any other questions as our morning progresses. Thank you.
Okay, so, wow, thank you. Okay, you guys know how to turn them on. Okay, good deal, so thank you very much, I appreciate it. Just so you know, we have Sean Cranish from Cary and Jim Webster from the County Board if you want to ask any questions of either one of them also. So questions are open for all the panelists. If you have a question for Larry Morrissey, for Mayor Morrissey first, just in the interest of time, I'd like you to ask that right now, but I don't want you to just leave if we don't have a lot of questions to fill our time. So, who's got a question? Darren, did you have a question still? Okay, come on up, buddy. And I've only got one mic. Unfortunately, it's this carry-along mic, so bear with me as I make my way to you. We'll have Bob, my co-coordinator, make his way to you.
Thank you, gentlemen, for showing up. My name is Darren Berglund. Mayor, do you support concealed carry?
Yes, I do support concealed carry. I plan on myself getting a concealed carry permit once they become available in the state of Illinois. Some of you may have heard me comment on this before, but you know, I was any doubt that I might have had in my opinions about concealed carry when I first came into office changed quickly as I became an elected official and just became very familiar with, as I said, the types of crimes that we're dealing with, and the focus should not be against law-abiding citizens. We should be focusing in our enforcement on folks who have no right to carry a gun, concealed or otherwise. They don't right because they've lost it, because they've committed felonies and they've broken the law, they have other problems in their life. Personally as well, I've had 3 threats that I've had to deal with since I got elected, none of which turned out to be any major event, but you know, once you get a death threat and you realize even with the support of the Rockford Police Department, I just know with myself, especially now with a very young family, I don't want to put my family's life at risk. I don't want to put my own life at risk in a way that if I can otherwise prevent and protect myself, I'm going to do it. And so, assuming we get this thing figured out this summer, I plan on pursuing that And as a matter of fact, I was even planning, had the law, not got passed, pursuing, there's an avenue for public officials. It's a fairly narrow avenue, but myself and a couple of aldermen had suggested, hey, let's try to get this done as a demonstration for our support for concealed carry. But also, as I said, I was dealing with multiple death threats that I've had to deal with. So I'm a supporter of concealed carry, and I said, hey, if a mayor feels that way, I would hope every citizen would feel like, and we should be able to give every citizen the support so that they can protect themselves and their own families.
Thank you, Mayor. Sure?
Yeah, many of you might not be aware that there has been a gun registration card in Rockford. And I got a question from the mayor about when is the city council going to move to get rid of that?
Yeah,
we want action on that.
There's a registration that, quite frankly, until it was brought up to me, I didn't even know it existed. It's been around since before 1900, if my memory serves me correctly, when I was briefed on it. But it's a registration that predated a lot of the federal laws on gun transfers and gun ownership. So, I'm not sure it should still be on the books. It is on the books. It's still a requirement. We do get that information. So if you buy a gun in the city of Rockford, different from Loves Park or McChesney Park, for example, there's a document that goes and is managed by the City of Rockford Police Department. I've asked our staff to look into whether or not there's any reason we should still have this in the books, whether or not it's redundant with regulations and practices that the ATF would already do. The value that if we pick up a gun illegally, our goal is to see every gun get traced back and try to find out the path. And if the law's been broken somewhere in the transfer of ownership, then we want to be supportive of enforcing the law against anybody who may have violated it in any of the transfer. We want to find out why criminals are getting guns illegally. We know there's straw purchases that are happening each and every day. I think that's one of the values that local documentation, whatever you want to call it, was potentially could do. I just don't know if it's valuable anymore, given the fact that we already have any gun that's purchased able to be traced by the ATF. And so I'm certainly, it's been a while since we looked at we started looking at it within the last probably year and a half. We've got a brand new council that's in. I encourage the discussion coming up for a lot of our aldermen. They probably have never even heard of it. We've got 7 new aldermen that have just joined our city council. So I'd encourage that discussion and look forward to it.
Monday night, city council has a meeting. So if you want to go, that's the time to talk to them about it. Josh?
Dave, to go along with that question, the 3 of us fought very hard to do something about that, and it's in the bill. It strictly preempts authority of local governments to regulate handguns and ammunition for handguns, including licensing, possession, registration, and transportation. So all local governments will no longer be able to do this once this bill is enacted. We want to make sure to get that in there.
Next question?
There was just one follow-up. I think Luther had asked, what about home rule? The bill, if I remember correctly, preempts home rule, so home rule is irrelevant as it relates to the bill.
Next question.
Anybody? Yes, sir.
My name is Mike Nelson. Been here for about 50 years in Rockford. I have actually 2 questions. I'm not sure who would be able to answer them. The first one is, where are we going to be able to get the applications? Can we download them and then turn them in? Or do we have to go to the state police to get the applications when it's in place?
As I mentioned earlier, none of the rules have been set into place yet. The state police are the ones who are going to be ultimately drafting the rules and the regulations. Since they have not been done yet, it is hard to say exactly what's going to be done. We don't know what's going to be involved with the 16 hours, how much of it's classroom, how much of it's range time, and so there's a lot of information that we just don't know is going to come out yet. My guess is that the state police who oppose this, the governor who opposes this, they're gonna do things to try to put rules in place that are gonna make it more difficult, and that means we may have to come back for more legislation and to close some of that. But at this point, it may be 3 or 4 months before we get a good indication of how you register, what kind of classes you take, where you get your classes, who's going to be teaching the classes, what the regulations are for teaching the classes. It may be a while yet.
Thank you. My second question, I think the gentleman, our representative on the left over here, might be able to answer that. How long, what's the duration of this permit? There's nothing in your handout on that.
Oh, yeah, sorry about that. That's going to be, it's a 5-year permit, and a couple of things, if it does become law and it's signed, speaking of home rule and preemption, those types of things, that would, that was one thing that was brought up, with some of the assault weapons ban, like the city of Chicago's got one. On record, to date, since it's been on the books, they've never actually charged anybody with violating their assault weapons ban. So, there's a lot of those ridiculous laws that are out there in the home rule. Unfortunately, some of those will stay in place. They won't be able to govern concealed carry, though. That gets back to the preemption that this is a universal concealed carry around the entire state. As far as timing, and again, Senator alluded to that, some of this has got to be worked out as far as exactly what qualifies. Within that 16 hours, though, there's going to be several components of training that are already had, and there's some parts in the legislation that it's outlined in Section 25. If you look at that later, and there's a couple of components there that will qualify for half of that 16 hours. Within 60 days of the bill being signed, the state police have to have a certification system set up so that trainers can be certified by the state police. So that's going to come out fairly rapidly, and then within 180 days they have to be ready and up and running with taking concealed carry applications. No doubt, we will have some delays. There'll be some playing around on the administrative level. We hope there'll be little of that, but we'll get back to that. And then if anybody's looking for some more details on how to become a certified trainer, that's Section 80 of the legislation, and I can forward you a copy of that if you don't have access to that. A great place to find that, for those of you who don't know where it's at, ilga.gov has the entire bill there. It's IL as in Illinois, GA.gov, and you just type in the bill number and that'll take you there. But again, contact me or any of us and we can send that to you. But there are some things laid out, and hopefully that'll move forward at a rapid pace. And we'll put pressure on them, and hopefully we won't have too much cleanup to do after the fact.
Yes.
Okay, go ahead.
There's an organization called Jews for the Defense of the Second Amendment, and they produced this documentary called No Guns for Negroes that goes through all of the gun laws and the Jim Crow laws in the South and elsewhere to prevent black people from having firearms. And when you look at the direction that it went with the 1968 Gun Control Act, it seemed to have broadened from there. But one of the points of Jim Crow laws is that you either restrict access by status or impose excessive or burdensome fees. And the costs of concealed carry in Illinois, we're looking at, I think last I saw, $150 permit fee, permit application fee, and then a few $100s for the 16 hours of training. And I don't know that how many of the other states, were much more than 8 or 12 hours, or what their fees are. But it seems to be quite a bit more expensive to, have and exercise your Second Amendment rights in Illinois under this bill when it finally becomes law. And I guess I want to speak with the state legislators primarily on the question of what legislatively they can do to go back and revisit this 16-hour requirement in particular. And I may have a follow-up depending on your responses.
I'll jump in real quick and then anybody else follow up. As I mentioned, I'm not happy with either of those. You know, I sponsored a Utah concealed carry class here, and at $50 and 4 hours, you know, that's fairly reasonable. You know, even up to 8 hours, you know, I think would have been reasonable. And as Representative Cabello mentioned, that was in 997, which I was a co-sponsor of also. I'd love to have that. And I think part of what we're going to have to look forward to is going forward is trying to reduce that fee, and I'd be in favor of that, but also trying to allow more things to qualify for the 16 hours. Practice, you know, practice at a gun range, those types of things. If that could take up half that time, or maybe 10 hours of that time, you know, I think that could be a reasonable compromise that might get some broad support. But absolutely, there are definitely things that we're going to water down, including the prohibited areas. It went a little bit farther than I wanted. Again, it's not as bad as some states, but some of that stuff, going back and having trailer legislation, it's going to be easier, I think, to try to get some of those things peeled off over time in little bits once we have the actual legislation put into place.
Some of the 16 hours is going to be cut down, especially if up to 8 hours of training completed in another state or by active, retired, or honorably discharged military members counts towards the training requirements. Renewal application requires 3 hours of training plus re-qualification on the firing range. So we did get that part of the bill so that some folks are taken care of. We are definitely going to have a trailer bill to try to get the requirement further down. I do believe that the three of us will be starting to sponsor more classes to try to, so that we'll pay for the classes so it's not so burdensome on people that can't afford it. We don't like the $150, but we have to realize that in this last budget for 2014, we only allocated $2.6 million more for FOID and concealed carry. Well, we're averaging anywhere between 40,000 to 80,000 applications a month. Well, that $2.6 million is going to cover nothing. So they needed to find a way to try to add some revenue to try to get everybody. So is it perfect? No. We should have been planning for this, but you can tell that there's a lot of folks that didn't want this. That's why there's no planning that took place before.
The only thing I'll add to that is we've got 36 states that have some kind of requirement for firearm safety courses. California is also 16 hours. Kansas is 8. Kentucky is 8. Michigan is 8. Ohio is 12. Oklahoma is 16. Texas is, depending on the background, is 10 to 15. And so we're going to be at the high end, which is what Madigan wanted to do. But again, if this is what it takes to get it passed, we'll do that. And in the end, if most of this is going to be range time, then it's not so bad. You can have some fun getting your range shooting in. So if that's what it takes to get through. But the fees are something that certainly will be looked at. Once it's in place, does it really cost that much to monitor this program? And this is not supposed to be a moneymaker for the state. The goal is to make sure the fees are enough to cover the cost to operate it, but that's all.
Quick follow-up. What can be done to accelerate the turnaround time for FOID applications? That's it.
Get rid of them. There's no reason for a FOID card anymore. None whatsoever. We're the only state that has it, and we need to file bills to make sure that we get rid of it. Now, this bill here does make it so that you can only have one card. So your concealed carry and your FOID card will be the same. We will be filing a bill to get rid of the FOID card because there's no reason for it.
What about making an endorsement on driver's license?
We can look at that as well, but they're going to give 2 cards anyways. It makes too much sense to put it on your driver's license.
I just want to real quick. I'm going to make a couple of follow-up questions on the issue of veterans. Is there a component to that that requires those veterans to either have marksmanship training or be recently discharged from the service? Because if somebody's been a veteran for, all their life, I mean, and how are you going to determine, or is it going to be arbitrary that, the state police says, well, you were a veteran 30 years ago, you're in the military 30 years ago, so we're not going to grant this because you were, in the military 30 years ago, and you were in the artillery, you weren't in the infantry. So I'd like to get some clarification on that.
Don't have it, and I apologize for that. All it says right now in our notes is that up to 8 hours of training completed in another state whereby active, retired, or honorably discharged members counts towards the training requirement. Now, I've never been in the military, it's one of my mistakes. What I think most military folks have gone through their basic training is heavy fire. They fire their guns quite often. It's like riding a bike. There's been times where people haven't gone out and shot for quite some time. They come back up, they get proficient right back in a matter of rounds. So it's nothing that we're afraid of. Our military men and women, I believe, are highly trained, and I think it's not going to be an issue.
Yeah, when I was in the military, I had to qualify every quarter. So, and then just on the range time. You guys are talking about range time, but you do factor in the cost of bullets, I hope. They cost a lot. So, next question.
Good morning. I was wondering if you could address, as far as you can, the concept of the reciprocity between other states, because I know that there are probably a lot of us here who have applied for their Utah, and it kind of seems like a waste, and according to what I read here, it's like zero both ways, so that kind of seems odd, especially for people coming from out of state.
Absolutely. And I agree, the reciprocity we'd like to have at 100%. Of course, Madigan Cullerton looked at this and said, well, they can come if you're from out of state and they can get our license because we want their $150. I mean, it's as simple as that. I'm sorry, 300 for out of state. It's as simple as that. They want other folks' dollars. So the only thing that's currently in the legislation is that training for the Utah license or others will count towards the training requirement for the Illinois license. But I agree with you. That's something that we need to get into place. Whether it be by rule or future legislation, it's just something we couldn't get into this version to allow true reciprocity with other states, especially like the ones the Senator listed off. I mean, you get your concealed permit in Texas, and you've paid your $100 or whatever it is, and you've had your 12 to 15 hours. If that's more than enough, that should count in Illinois, and that's going to be our intent going forward. We want to have that in place, but as of right now, it's not in this legislation.
And David, just to answer your question, the training requirements shall include live fire exercise of at least 30 rounds. So it shall not be more than 30 rounds.
Oh, cool.
But if you're going to allow for 8 hours of range time, you're still going to pay for the range, you're still going to pay for all the bullets. That costs a lot of money. If you fire off 1,000 bullets in a day, that could cost you $200.
There's an accuracy thing in there too, about 75%.
And you got to have an accuracy thing.
70%.
The way I read it here, 30 rounds, no more than 30 rounds.
To qualify.
It's part of the qualifying. It does not say in here what the actual training will be. We'll try to get some clarification for you, but the way I read it, the qualification at least part is 30 rounds, and you must get 70% accuracy. Now, I don't know about you. I've been around guns for quite some time. I love to shoot them, so that's the fun part, shooting at a target. So I'm not too worried about the rounds because I'm usually trying to get out there and shoot because I like to be accurate. And I'm sure everybody in here would like to be as well. You could always find reloads somewhere for much cheaper. There's a lot of good armorers in town that I'm sure will do their best to keep their prices low as well.
If it's 8 hours of range time, that means you just have to be at the range for 8 hours. It's possible they could just spend a couple hours watching Dirty Harry movies. And so, and then you can follow up a little shooting after that. We'll look around it.
Next question, Bob.
Okay, we have two gentlemen with questions here, and then I'll move towards the middle.
My question is, you were talking about possibly eliminating the FOID card. Our FOID cards currently are 10 years, whereas in the concealed carry is going to be 5 years. How are we going to do this?
So what you're saying is either way, every 5 years you're going to pay $150, plus then every 10 years you're going to pay double that because you're going to have 2 cards. Well, let's get rid of one of them. Let's get rid of the FOID card. That doesn't mean that we have to make more money off of that because we're eliminating one card to go to another. I think what we need to do is, it should be fairly simple, that when you apply for a concealed carry, they're going to know that you have a FOID card. So there's no reason why they can't put that right on the concealed carry card.
But this is the state of Illinois, and you know how they are. More money, more money.
I unfortunately know how they are. And the problem is that it makes too much sense.
Why do we have to pay that exercise for constitutional rights? My question exactly.
This is Illinois. I think what's going to happen is if you get the concealed carry card, you don't need the FOID. And so you're not going to have both. So it's those who don't get the concealed carry, will have the FOID. And again, this, as was mentioned, we're not supporters of the FOID. This is Illinois, and we're just saying under Illinois rules, what's going to happen is with this, you don't need the FOID. If you don't get the concealed carry, then you would still have the FOID.
Okay, we have another gentleman here with a question.
One for Representative Cabela. You're a police officer, and the duty to inform, if you're the investigating officer making the stop, and you initiate the stop, and I inform you, now when your backup arrives, like they do, and all these police officers showing up, am I going to be required to report to every police officer that shows up on the scene?
I would, to be safe, but the officers are highly trained. They're going to know exactly what to do. A lot of times we can communicate without saying a word, just by our body language. So the officer that makes the initial contact with you is going to make sure that his partners that come up to help do whatever are going to know as well. But it's not clear in the law, so he just gave us a good idea for another trailer bill to make sure that we get some clear language in there, so thank you.
And I have one for Senator Severson. You were quoted in an article stating that for mass transportation, that people that rely on that would be able to use the FOID, other container transport law, where they would have to take their concealed carry arm off, eject the magazine, and put it in another container to carry it on mass transit. I think it was at the Register Star, I read it online. And is the other container law for the FOID card going to be acceptable on mass transit for people that rely on it?
Yeah, I'm not sure exactly what the context was with that. One of the frustrations that we had with this is some of these exclusions. You know, two of the areas where we have the biggest concern, where people have, especially women, are when they're on mass transit and when they're on bike paths or walking paths, where women get assaulted all the time. Now, we were able to fight to get in an exemption to allow people in parks and forest preserves that you can be on the pathway and still carry. So that was a win that we didn't think we were going to get, but we did get. On mass transit, it's a real problem because going to the mass transit, you know, you can carry. Getting off the mass transit, you can carry. But what do you do on the mass transit? And then it becomes a problem. Now, how they ultimately put all the rules down about how you do that, it's going to be a real problem. And so I guess I can't give you the specifics of how it's going to work on there, but we know it's a problem. It's also a problem when it comes to the mayor mentioned earlier, concerned about elected officials. You know, one of our concerns about judges and state's attorneys. You know, if one of our judges is going to put a gang member away for 30 years, and then he's got to walk from the courthouse to his car every night, that's a problem. But the law says that judge can't carry a gun in the courthouse And so he's going to have to go from the courthouse to the car before he can get, or someone's going to have to walk up and hand him.
Can't do that either.
Or
Can't do that
slip it.
either.
That's true.
It's exempted on property owned by local government.
So he's going to have to walk to his car before he can even put his gun on. So it's one of those problems in the law that have to be changed. And that's what we want to come back to address is some of those areas. So because it doesn't make sense. We did get on there. You can get out of your car, so at least you can get in and out of your car and still carry when you're in parking lots or in those areas. But clearly, it's going to be a problem when it comes to mass transit, when it comes to defining public events, and when it comes to going to public places or not. Even the mayor can't carry it to City Hall. He can't carry it walking from City Hall to his car. He can't have it. So how is that going to help him when he's accosted in the parking lot of the City Hall?
You could use a panty actually. That law's still in effect, correct? I mean, that'd still be allowed.
Well, that loophole.
The loophole, the fanny pack
I have a
loophole.
question up here from one of the panelists. Sean?
Yeah, I just had a question about the deadline and the number of votes that it would have taken, for a supermajority. A lot of people have been kind of feeling the same way I have, which is, why are all these concessions necessary when we have a deadline and we just go straight to Constitution carrying? So I was just kind of wondering, did we not have enough true supporters to prevent the non-supporters from getting that supermajority they need to pass the law? And couldn't we have just stonewalled and let it go over the cliff, so to speak? Or just stonewalled and said, hey, you know what, you're going to pass this bill, you've had years and years and years and years, you're going to pass this good bill here. So I'm just kind of curious as far as the numbers or why we felt we didn't have enough or that we had to get a bill passed. That's what I'm wondering.
Yeah, would we have been better off if we just...
Just a couple of strategies with that, and I'll let the representatives talk about it, dealing with the House. We talked about these hurdles that we have to overcome. A lot of people voted for this because they were concerned that the alternative might be worse. And it's a gamble. They don't know. We don't know what the courts would have done. We don't know what appeals would have done. They've already gotten 2 extensions. So we don't know what the courts would have done, and that's part of this strategy. But now we don't know if the governor's going to come back with mandatory vetoes taking out a lot of the good things of this, and will we have enough support to override a mandatory veto, not a total veto. We can override the governor if he vetoes the whole bill. He's not going to do that. But if he takes certain parts of it out, there's a lot of legislators that we're going to lose. And so there's a strategy here that we're trying to work out, get something passed that's actually going to be going to law that can be enforced, number one. And so if we go too far, we don't know what's going to happen with the courts. And if the governor tries to do mandatory vetoes, which means mandatory vetoes means he makes changes in the law and takes out some of the things that we have in there that were controversial that we like. If he takes those out, will we have enough votes to change that or override the governor on it? So that's where we're at, and it's don't know yet, but again, that's the reason why we chose to go this route. It is better to get something than gamble on nothing, and we can always come back and make other changes.
Yeah, he highlighted the strategy perfectly. Constitutional carry is no guarantee. Does the court say, well, we'll adopt all 997? Do they exclude parking lots? You allow a lot of opportunity, a lot of latitude there. And, again, I rely a little bit on the NRA and their work in the 49 states that they've done. They were a little standoffish going to that, too. There's too many unknowns. Do you allow home rule exemptions, so every home rule municipality bans concealed carry or prohibits it in such a way that makes it impossible? So you really open yourself up for a lot of those types of concerns, and then you end up with that patchwork that we're kind of afraid of having, and that's why we got the preemption for concealed carry statewide. So again, that strategy you outlined perfectly, and that's what we have to look at realistically to get this on the books.
Oh, yeah.
I have thank everyone. I have to take off right now, but I wanted to just thank David and Bob and everyone who put the event together this morning and thinking of inviting me, and I appreciate that. A couple of questions I'll just leave you with, and it hits on this last topic you were talking about. One of my concerns is that because there's so many exceptions that are within the law, that if someone unknowingly is at an event where they're not supposed to have it, and it fits one of the exceptions that they're not supposed to have it, and they've otherwise been permitted, then they are hit with a misdemeanor. If that goes through, then are they looking at being banned from ever having a concealed permit again? So I think those types of concerns, I'd ultimately be interested in what the NRA's experience and others' experiences in other states have been. But what I don't want to see happen is our law-abiding citizens turned into being perceived as criminals or otherwise being banned. And that's why I think some of the state's attorneys that have taken positions around the state, although it may seem confusing at times, I think one of the issues that we'll have to work through in the early stages of this is the prosecutorial discretion on just knowing where the limits are going to be, and like I said, not trapping law-abiding citizens from otherwise becoming victims or otherwise becoming criminalized through this process. Again, thank you very much. If you do another one of these, I'd be happy to come back. Appreciate your time this morning.
House Bill 1711 was my bill that I never thought would be called in committee. It was the bill to take away the concealed carry rights of the Chicago aldermen. It was called in committee, which shocked the you-know-what out of me. I was respectful. I gave a very short synopsis of what the bill did, and when I saw some of the reaction, I went just a little bit further to remind them that if the aldermen and the mayors go through a shorter period of time of training, they're technically called conservators of the peace, which means they're police officers and they can arrest people. Once they heard that, they were shocked. That bill passed out of committee with an amendment, because I only had it for 1 million people or more. They asked me to amend it so that it included everybody. I said yes. It went to the House floor. It needed a supermajority to preempt the home rule cities, including Chicago. It passed with 94 votes, which was unbelievable. And then it was hijacked in the Senate by somebody's dad that you know, everybody has heard, Emil Jones III. He's the guy that said, "Where's Rockford?" So I confronted him after a committee meeting that I had to talk about another bill in the Senate. He was the chairman of the Senate, and it was a lively discussion. I let him talk, and what he told me was some very good information. He said, these aldermen, they go through all this stuff. They need to conceal carry, and this, they're all doing it. I said, really? According to the state police, only one of them are doing it. It looks like I need to have somebody do an open investigation now. And that's when he finally said, why don't you make an appointment to come see me? So that bill is not dead. We're still going to try to get it called in the Senate, and I'm sure Senator Severson is going to do his best to help as well.
Chicago aldermen have to have special legislation because they could never pass a background check. That's why they have to do something special for them.
If anybody has a question, just raise your hand or I'll look at it and I'll bring this to you. Here we go.
Yes, Mr. Severson, you brought up a couple questions a little while ago. One about judges, they have to run down to the car to get their gun. Well, what about lock boxes in the building? They have them over at the new justice system. Officers have to put them in there before they even go in there. So why not do that? And you brought up another question about mass transit. What do we do about that? Well, 49 other states have mass transit. What are they doing?
Probably lock boxes in courthouses. The way the law is written, you can't get from your car to the lock box. Because the way the law is written right now, you would not be allowed to carry to get in there. But those are things we brought up. We brought up during the debate, which, again, it's just common sense. And they put that language in there just to put these these little roadblocks for us every step along the way. They can't give a good argument why it doesn't make sense to allow at least law enforcement or judges or state's attorneys or people to get to even get to a lockbox. But right now, that's the way it's drafted.
And just to add that, I've had plenty of state's attorneys, prosecutors, city employees, county employees. They've come to me and they said, hey, same thing. We want the right to carry inside of a state building because somebody's coming in off the street. If they're mad at us or they're going to do something or open fire, we want the ability to defend ourselves. And I agree. I think that that's absolutely something that should be allowed. Again, we're going to have to take future steps. And just to point out, again, some of these exemptions are prohibited areas. There's other states where you can't carry in any restaurant. We actually have that in Illinois in this legislation where you'll be able to be allowed to carry it into a restaurant, where the volume of their food isn't more, the majority of their food isn't, or sales isn't in alcohol. So, that's something that there's many other states that don't have that. So again, it's not perfect. There's a lot of things we want to still work on, such as, that question you asked there, and there's stuff that there's holes, but like the senator said, they put up plenty of roadblocks and plenty of issues and additions that we're not happy with, but, in essence, to get this thing started, it's still, it's back to that point.
The mass transit, in my opinion, is the Chicago way of saying that we're going to try to get away from concealed carry, because it really defeats the purpose of concealed carry. You get to a train in Chicago, and you have to unload your weapon, and you have to put it in 2 separate containers, and then you can get on a train. Well, don't you think everybody in the world around you is going to be seeing that? And then when you get off the train, you can load your weapon back up, and it's an idiotic part of the law. Because now you're going to have more calls to the police for somebody's going to say, hey, I see somebody with a gun. And you're actually going to have probably some accidental discharges because people are in a hurry. And they're going to be rushing to get their concealed carry back into their weapon back into their holster, and off they go. And there's going to be some issues with that. So again, we will be filing a lot of trailer bills, and that's going to be one of the trailer bills we're going to file.
I have 2 questions for you. First is a hypothetical. What happens if the governor vetoes the bill and it does not get overridden before the federal timeline runs out? The second is, you have provisions for gun-free zones in this bill, which we all know do not work, as of Bloody Mess and Aurora, Sandy Hook, and several other places show. Why are these gun-free zones not mandated to have armed guards to protect the citizens?
But again, all those zones, we agree with you in most of them. I think it's something like 50 or 60% of schools across the nation have armed guards as it is now, whether it's off-duty police officers, on-duty police officers, or private security. And that's effective. And I don't disagree. They should have that. Schools should look to be doing that, and should look to do what they can to protect themselves. Back to the mass transit thing briefly too. In practicality too, you got to think about this and the ability to enforce. Not saying that this is great, but in practicality, you're walking through, you're about to get on a train, you take the clip out, you put it in one pocket, gun goes in another, in a backpack. That's what's going to be happening. It's going to be readily accessible to you in case something happens. We do need to fix these things. We do need to clarify it. In all of these safe areas, that you've got here, you're right. They don't work. We need to fix those. And I think everybody here is in agreement. We just need to continue to chip away at this and move forward.
I'm in agreement except for the name. It's not a gun-free zone. It's a free-to-kill zone. When Madigan went through his little exercises of going through 48 amendments, and I was voting no on all of them, all that exercise was to, and I believe Representative Sosnowski did the same, he voted no on every single one of them. All he was doing was giving our opponents, if we decide to run again, ammunition to use against us. Cabello Sosnowski voted yes to let guns in schools. Cabello and Sosnowski said, yes, your children should be hurt because they want guns in schools. Well, I want our children to be safe. And if you have a free-to-kill zone, they're not going to be safe.
goes back to the mandatory veto. Is it true, the way how's it work? If he changes a few things, it's up to the bill's sponsor to either vote to accept them or vote to override, right?
Yes. So what happens is, governor has a couple options. Governor has a couple options. Number one is he can do nothing at all and doesn't want his fingerprints on it. And after a certain amount of time, I think it's 60 days, the bill automatically becomes law. Then he can say, I had nothing to do with it, I didn't sign it. So that's one option. The other option is he can just outright veto the bill and say, I don't like it, I'm going to take a stand, I'm going to veto it. Now, if he does that, he knows it's going to be overridden by the legislature, but then the governor can stand up to all his constituents and say, see, look at me, I voted against that bill, but it's those legislators that put it in the law. So he can do that, and that gives him cover. The third, though, is he can come back and mandatorily veto it, which means he can alter or change the bill. And then the sponsor of the bill has two choices, that he can either vote to accept those changes or they can vote to reject those changes. The problem is if the governor makes a few changes, for example, the example that Joe gave about restaurants, this bill allows, and we fought for, a person to have a right to carry in a restaurant as long as 50% of it is food or more. A lot of states don't have that. He could easily take that out. And could they get enough votes to sustain that? They probably could, because again, there are a lot of legislators who voted for this holding their nose because they didn't like it, but they thought it was going to be they didn't want to go the alternative. So we don't know which is going to be the strategy or how quickly he's going to do it or what the court's reaction is going to be. We're not back in session until October. So if the governor is going to do a veto, will the courts wait until then for the legislature to act? That we don't know either. So there's a lot of things that we just don't know is going to happen yet. But if you know Madigan, if you know Cullerton, they have a strategy that they're working on. And so we have to be vigilant until this is done.
Let me just give you a little background of what happened with this bill, the bill that we passed. I was going to vote no on it because I liked House Bill 997. Now, we got a lot of nasty emails, which we should get. Don't ever not send us a nasty email. But a lot of the NRA folks were very, very upset, even though behind the scenes the NRA was supporting this. A part of this, getting this bill passed, the NRA was not allowed to support this in any way. And the reason why they were not allowed to support this in any way is because if they did, that would pull some of the Chicago people off. So a lot of the things behind the scenes that a lot of people don't know that happened down there is, believe it or not, the NRA was supporting this bill. They just couldn't do it publicly because all of a sudden you have the Chicago Democrats supporting a bill that the NRA is supporting. Now they're in trouble back in their home districts. I wish the NRA would have supported it so that they could be in trouble back in their home district, but unfortunately that's not the way it worked out. So just giving you a little bit of insight behind the scenes, the NRA was supporting this bill. The NRA and the three of us and several others will have trailer bills moving forward.
I just want to pause for a second and talk for a second about Lisa Madigan and the appeal to the Supreme Court. So if you don't know, what Lisa Madigan did was she filed a second motion with the Supreme Court, and one of Obama's Supreme Court justices by the name of, what's that woman's name? Kagan. She went ahead and granted a 30-day extension on the time when she can file to overturn the Seventh Circuit Court ruling. That doesn't have anything to do with the July 9th deadline. The Seventh Circuit ruling says you've got to have some form of concealed carry by July 9th. Madigan filed an appeal to the Supreme Court to overturn that ruling. Now my question would be for you guys. Is there a strategy that you know of for her to file the appeal on July 8th, thus putting a stay on the 7th Circuit's ruling, and then Quinn can subsequently forget about it or veto it, knowing that the 7th Circuit's ruling is being appealed to the Supreme Court? And if it is appealed to the Supreme Court, what are the chances they'll even hear it? And how long do you think it would take for them to hear it? I know you're not at the federal level, but perhaps you might know.
Any of us who say with any definite answer to that, we don't know. Unfortunately, there's some unknowns. She may have a strategy. She may not talk to the governor at all. Maybe they're in cahoots on this thing. I don't know if they've got a behind-the-scenes strategy as far as date filing and when they're going to file that. And would the court even look at it? I mean, they could look at it the same day and say, forget it. You're done. It's July 9th. That's it. Get it done. Otherwise, that's it. So you've got several different balls in the air that are moving there. And it's just like the legislators. I mean, we got guys and ladies out of Chicago. They have no right being in the Senate or the House. And, Representative Bell and Senator talked about that. I mean, they're plants for Madigan. They paid their entire campaign to get them in. They came as community organizers, and they've got no backgrounds in business. They don't understand concealed carry. Some of them have. They're carrying weapons. They don't even have the permit that they're supposed to have. As far as the aldermen in the city of Chicago, so you've got a mixed bag of folks. And there's some that are very qualified and they're good at what they do, but we have a lot of moving pieces, and I just use that to highlight. I mean, trying to get some of these guys to go along with that, and the games we had to kind of play behind the scenes with the NRA staying neutral in order to get them to vote for it. There's a lot of goofiness that happens, for lack of a better term, in order to get some of these things through strategically. And, we're looking at all the different options, working with NRA and the State Rifle Association, as far as what could happen and what can we do, based off what the next action is that, but a lot of it's, going to, we got to get to that date, see what games they're going to try to play, and then respond. I mean, we're prepared for several different responses, but at the same time, you're just like you highlighted, we don't necessarily know what they're going to do, and there's a lot of different things that could happen as we get closer to that date.
Hold on, Bob.
These extensions are nothing but a big bag of you-know-what. They have this budget that they didn't have us part of at the very end, and then give us 1 hour to look it over to vote on. You're telling me that the governor could not take the time to go over what we got in an hour? It's just a way to slow everything down, to see if they can find a different strategy to try to beat us. Well, that's why you got to call Governor Quinn's office. That's why you got to email Governor Quinn's office. That's why you got to send Governor Quinn's office letter after letter after letter. The more pressure that we can put on a lame duck governor, the better. And that's exactly what he is. He is a lame duck governor who has no power in Springfield. He has not been in the process, but now he wants to try to stop something. Well, it's our time to make sure that we get up and stand up for what we believe in and start flooding his office with those calls.
Good morning. I first want to say that I really appreciate I really appreciate the actions that have been done by my representatives, Mr. Sosnowski and the State Senator, Mr. Severson, in regards to, keeping the Second Amendment, our rights in there. And I think everybody needs to realize these guys are on our side. And that being said, I appreciate everything you're doing and will continue to do in that regard with the framework that you have to work with. So I have complete confidence in your ability to get all those things done. But my question involves, there's a part of the bill talks about certain bars or places that serve alcohol that get at least 50% from alcohol sales that you cannot carry in there.
And I thought it said that those places are required by law to state that. So like if I come into a place like this, how do you know when they come in? So that is my question, if you could elaborate on that. Good question.
Good question. First on the history, I would just say that I am proud to have one of the few legislators that has a lifetime A+ rating with the NRA, so which is I think is the right thing to do. The scoring that they use is based on common sense bills, and so I'm happy to certainly happy to have that kind of rating. The 50% rule is there is going to be required to have signage because any restaurant still has the right to post no shoes, no shirt, no guns. So they can do that, but they're going to have to post it at every entrance so you know. And so restaurants will have, or bars or clubs will have signs on the window posted that says that, you know, that it is banned here or it's not allowed here. So that there's not going to be a got you type mentality when it comes to that.
Bob?
Okay, time flies when we're having fun. We have 3 more questions up here, then we're done.
Real quick. Representative Sosnowski has to leave, so let's give him a big round of applause. Thank you so much for being here. Thanks, Bob. And as Bob said, we have 3 questions left, and we'll wrap it up.
Okay, the question is, you earlier said that 70% is the new qualification. Unless you're militarily trained or on the range a lot, you're probably not going to be able to shoot that well. What is the range to the target? Or do you not know yet?
We don't know just yet. What happens right now is until the law is signed by the governor, that's when the 180 days takes place for the state police to then enact their training laws. That's when they have the 180 days to put everything into place. So until that happens, I'm sure they're working on it right now, but until the law is signed, we won't know what the state police have come up. They have 180 days after the law is signed. So at this point, I apologize, we just don't know that yet.
10 shots at 5 yards, 10 at 7, 10 at 10.
We don't know that yet. I've not seen that anywhere in the bill.
It's below the 70% requirement.
It's not nowhere in my notes. So.
Hi. My question is in regards to the restricted areas. There's an awful lot of restrictions on here, which I know I personally disagree with, and most of the other people will here too. But my real question isn't going to make you guys fight or justify those, but it's on the bill's constitutional survivability because of one of these restrictions in particular. It says that restricted locations include buildings under the control of a unit of local government. And while I'm sure the intent of that is to stop people with firearms from coming into senators' offices and things of that nature, it does create a de facto ban on firearm ownership for anyone that resides in public housing. And I'm just wondering how, based on the Emerson ruling, that the right to bear firearms is an individual right, and on the Equal Protection Clause in the Constitution, how that will allow our law to pass any constitutional challenge. And in relation to that, is there a separation clause in this law that allows part of it to be struck down and not the entire bill?
The answer is yes, they can strike down part of it. The public housing issue was debated a lot, and obviously, if you can imagine, it's an interesting debate because that's where a lot of the gun violence is, that's where a lot of the illegals are. And basically what this legislation is saying is if you happen to be a law-abiding citizen, if you happen to be a law-abiding mother trying to protect her children in public housing, that she's not going to be allowed to do that. And so it's unfortunate, but that is something that the advocates for public housing fought hard for. It will be interesting to see if that gets challenged. A lot of these definitions are going to be certainly are going to be problematic. large gatherings, what does large gatherings mean? And so that's when different rules will come down while the other legislation passed to kind of clarify this. This passed really too easy the way it is, and that's why you just got to keep thinking that they're planning something else.
Yes.
Some other way to put roadblocks in there. You know, with the concealed carry, they just kept staff not concealed carry, with the FOID card. You know, they just kept staff way down, and even though the law said you had to issue within 30 days, it's 90 days or it's longer now, and they don't care. They don't care if it's breaking the law. They say, well, fine, sue us. Go to the Attorney General and say something. And you know what's going to happen. So we have a long ways to go before this becomes a reality, because I just got a funny feeling that they've got more delays and things that we're going to be fighting for the next 12 months.
All right, I'm kind of curious on your opinions or theory of magazine capacity. A lot of communities are working on banning magazines, or I can't think of it, overloading or the magazine capacity. So, and what's your theory on it, and how do you guys stand on it?
I love it. You would have enjoyed being down there watching the debate, as one of the Chicago legislators stood up when we're trying to they're trying to pass a separate bill on banning more than 10 rounds. And they said, you know, there's really no need to have a 100-round clip in these handguns. And I said, well, okay. It just shows the mentality. And they try looking, they want to put a ban on clips, but you could buy clips in other states and bring them into Illinois. How are you going to regulate clips? There's no numbers on those. Clips can last for 20 years. It just goes to the mentality of the people who are trying to push these ridiculous, unenforceable laws. Now, in the end, the good news, we were able to stop that. And the other point we tried making with a lot of these legislators is, you know, we have a lot of manufacturers in Illinois that make clips. So you're going to make it illegal for a company to sell clips in Illinois, but it's okay to manufacture them in Illinois? They'd have to take them and ship them out of the state so people could go buy them out of state and bring them back in. Ridiculous. So in the end, it hasn't passed yet, but they're going to be coming back with more bills to put more bans on these on guns, and to have clip legislation. So again, we have to be vigilant every step along the way.
Okay, these magazine bans are also idiotic. I mean, it only takes one bullet to put somebody down sometimes, so are they going to try to limit us to a half bullet? I mean, it doesn't make sense. And what we're always trying to do, and the Senator is the same way, as well as Representative Cisnowski is, we're here to make sure that the citizens that abide by the law have the same playing field as the criminal who will never abide by the law.
A half bullet is a BB. Okay, so just a couple of things to wrap up. I got one last question here. I want the representatives to make a final closing statement. But if you have a card that starts with the license plate 811, this gentleman back here would like for you to move it, please. If your license plate starts with 811. Okay, so I'm going to have one more question. I'm going to make a couple of statements, and then we're going to close with our two representatives, and we are well within our time. Okay, one last question. Please, quick.
Quick as I can. It's me again. Is it possible that Quinn and his cohorts in Chicago are wanting to postpone the ratification of this bill until spring, when it could possibly put on a minor election and maybe voted down because the attendance is notoriously low on those?
Yeah.
Bring the election, put a question on the ballot?
Yeah. To be put on for repeal or denial or anything else voted out. Because it's not federally insured.
Anything is possible, but I don't believe the courts are gonna let us get away with that.
Okay, that's your personal opinion.
Right.
There's no indications whether they might be headed in that way, because you're not sure about what the strategy is.
They don't share that strategy with us, so we've got to make sure that our own strategy is to make sure that.
That's why we have to look at all that.
The law would have to be repealed. If they were going to try to do put a question in the ballot, that couldn't be done until next spring. We would have to pass legislation, and then that legislation would say that the question would have to go on the ballot in the next November election, which would be the governor's race. The courts wouldn't let us, wait until November, so it would have to be a repeal of the law that was already put into place. And could they do that? Certainly the legislature could try to do that, but I don't think even the Democrats want that question on the ballot in November of next year. Bring it on if they want to. But even if it was done, what's driving this is the courts. And the courts are going to say, even if Illinois legislature passes a repeal, the courts are not going to let it stand. So I think we're okay.
Thank you. Okay, couple things. I just want to thank my board members from the Rockford Tea Party. Luther Landon, thank you. Ulysses S. Arnn, thank you. Peter Thomas, thank you. Shannon Millsnuff, thank you. And of course my son, who's the doorman. Thank you so much. Okay, so the Rockford Tea Party stands for a couple of things. I hope you know what they are. Limited government, limited taxation, free enterprise, and constitutional integrity. Constitutional integrity is the reason why we have this. We believe in the Constitution, we believe in the Second Amendment. It is the guarantee of the rest of the Constitution. Throughout history, governments have used their force to oppress their people. And over the last century, 100 million people were killed because their firearms were taken from them. They had no ability to defend themselves. Now, I'm not saying that our government's doing that, but I'm saying the Second Amendment is our guarantee that that Constitution remains in place and remains a valid document. That's what the Tea Party stands for. It doesn't stand for anything else. It's not about race. It's not about social issues. Although on the page, we talk about those things because we address them to elicit conversation. But the core principles are limited government, limited taxation, constitutional integrity, and free enterprise. So I'd like to have the two representatives make closing statements, and then we will close it. If you want to find Rockford Tea Party, the best place to find us is at the Rockford Tea Party group on Facebook or Rockford Tea on Facebook. If you want to get on our email list, send me an email, send me a private message there, and I'll put you on the email list. We put out good information periodically. It's not a barrage of emails. It's once every 2 weeks, unless we have an event, and then we promote through the email probably twice a week. But other than that, it's once a week or once every 2 weeks when we put something out. So, if you guys can make a closing statement for us, we'd appreciate it. Oh, one last thing. Lisa, who in this room is going to vote for Lisa Madigan for Attorney General?
No! Or governor.
Who in this room is going to vote for her for governor? Lisa Madigan, the additional chief opponent. And Lisa Madigan's father, who is a leader of the Illinois House, who acts like John Cabello's boss, is also a chief opponent of our right to conceal carry. Even though he wanted this bill, like Senator Stevenson said, he's got something tucked away in his sleeve. He's like a magician. These guys got to be voted out of office. If we really want to change things, you've got to vote. And you got to vote right. You can't be a low information voter. You got to get informed. So, with that said, Senator Stevenson, please, and then Representative Cabello.
All right, thanks again for allowing me to stop by and have a chance to talk with all of you. I think I saw Paul Arena. Are you still in there? Did I see you walk in?
Back here.
Back there? There you go, Paul. Paul's with the Rockford Apartment Association and the State of Illinois Apartment Association, one of those organizations that helped and weighed in and supported this as well. And so we appreciate you being here and thanks for the statewide support that you gave us. Also want to thank you for electing John Cavello to the legislature. It is great to have a partner in the House that gets it. So keep your eyes on him, and it's wonderful having him there. This has been years in the making. All the years that I've worked on this and sponsored this legislation, we didn't think that we were going to get this far. We have still a long ways to go before it's done, but I am certainly up for the battle. And remember, what you're pushing for in this is not kooky. You're not out of line. You're not the wackos. You are the normal, everyday American citizen that wants common sense of protecting themselves, protecting their families, and protecting their communities. So keep up the battle because it's the right thing to do. We know that it works, and in the end, it saves lives, it saves your family's lives, it saves your neighbors' lives, and that's why we're going to continue to keep working for this legislation. So thanks again for allowing us to be here.
After this event, everybody, if you want to stay, you can stay, hang out, talk, eat, have one beer max. Or if you feel like going over to Cap Guns, Kenny's Cap Guns, you can get a discount of 5%, or you can go over to the Bullet Stop, get a 10%. Either way, they both have good deals. They both have fair prices. And over at Bullet Stop, they're doing a raffle for Wounded Warriors. Very, very worthy cause. So please go over there. And there was one more thing.
I'm gonna hang out and order some food here, have a beverage. So.
Okay, and then John, please wrap it up.
I've got a noon event to get to too, so I'm sorry I can't stick around and stay for a lot, but again, thanks.
Thanks for coming.
Thank you very much for having me. It's also great to have a seasoned senator that you can always throw ideas to and get some help when you're trying to navigate that craziness called Springfield. Again, thank you very much for having us today. Just want to say a few things. I know we've been here for quite a while. One is, please don't start to conceal carry yet. We've waited this long. You can wait a little bit longer. I can legally conceal carry since I'm a police officer. I have not concealed carry since September 1st of last year. I will not conceal carry until you can conceal carry. That's not only what's good for one is good for all. I believe that wholeheartedly. We fought all this spring for this bill. We will fight today. We will fight tomorrow. We will fight next week and next month until you can have a concealed carry bill that you can live with. You have our promise on that. We will fight for it. I believe we've shown that already. Don't ever hesitate to call us. We're here for you. Keep our feet to the fire. It's the only way that I want to ever earn your vote. Don't take this issue to say, oh, John Cavello is the greatest. Hold me to the fire on every single issue. Are we going to always agree? No. Are there going to be some times where I've got David Hale yelling and screaming at me? Yes. I hope not. But politicians, which I hope I never will be one, need to make sure that their feet are held to the fire. Because if they're not, they think everything is fine. Call me, yell, scream, do whatever you need to. When you come into my office and we have a concealed carry bill, don't worry about putting your gun in your car. You can bring it in. I'll look forward to it. Enjoy yourself today. Thank you.
I just want to say one more thing. Jim Webster, thank you so much. The Winnebago County Board for years has passed resolutions after resolutions. They've kept this thing alive, and Jim has quarterbacked that. He has been tirelessly working on this issue, and so Jim, I want to thank you for doing all the work that you've